All right, well, in today's video, I am going to be talking about becoming a trusted advisor. Becoming a trusted advisor. Now, I know most people in internal audit like to believe that internal auditors are trusted advisors. I know in the discipline, in the profession in general, a lot of people put those words to internal audit. And I know internal audit likes to believe they are a trusted advisor, but I'm going to do a video series now on what it actually takes to become a trusted advisor, because those two words, trust and advisor, actually probably mean something different than what you might think they mean. And can you be trusted? Yes. But do most internal auditors do the work necessary to be considered by other people to be trusted? And often the answer is no. And I know that's going to shock some people. It may be triggering to some people. But I'm just going to go through and talk about it because I really want you to be seen as a trusted advisor. But there's work that you have to do in order to become trusted and to give advice. So as I said, this is going to be, I'm going to do a series of videos on this. And so this is the first one where I want to start off just talking about some of the basics. And then we're going to build upon that and show you some of the things that you could do. Again, you can do it or not do it. It's up to you. If you feel like you've got this under control, then there's no reason for you to listen to this video. But the fact that you're still listening, I think, means you'd like to know a little bit more about how to become a trusted advisor. So let's get in and talk about that. So the first thing is, I told you I'd bring up some questions maybe for you to ask yourself. And so again, I'm recording this live. So if you're on with me, you can, post something in the comments to let me know you're here. If you have questions about what I'm talking about, you can share that as well. So here's some questions that you might be able to ask yourself to know how well you're doing. Right? Because if we want to improve, the first thing we have to know is where we currently are, right? Just like if you're, trying to drive someplace. I live in northern Arizona, and let's say I want to go to Dallas, Texas. Well, I have to know where I'm at. I'm in northern Arizona in order to chart my course for how to get to Dallas, Texas, right? And it's the same way with anything in professional development, anything that you're trying to do. You have to be honest with where you're at, right? Because again, imagine if I lied to the GPS and I said, no, I'm in Salt Lake, or I'm in Las Vegas and I want to get to Dallas. Well, it's going to give me directions from those other places, not from where I actually am, right? And so it's important to be honest, even if sometimes it hurts. Because again, I'm still trying to learn this. I'm still trying to be more trusted by people. And a lot of that has to do with what I choose to do or choose not to do. Okay. And so let's think about some questions that you might ask yourself, because you might be sitting there thinking, well, I think I do a pretty good job of this. Okay. Well, ask yourself the question: when was the last time somebody came to you and asked for your advice? When was the last time that happened? Did it happen this week? Did it happen last week? Last month? Was it 6 months ago? A year ago? Never? Right? That's going to start to help you seeing, because if nobody has ever come to you as an internal auditor, especially if you're a chief audit executive and in charge of the function, if nobody has come to you asking for your advice, they don't trust you and they don't think you have advice for them. Now, again, I'm not saying that you're not a trustworthy person. I'm not saying that you don't have advice, but those other people don't perceive you as being that. if they're not asking, right? So how long has it been since someone came to you and asked for your advice? Only you can answer that. But I will tell you, if it's been more than a month or 3 months, then maybe you should consider that there are some things you could do to improve your trusted advisor status. Okay. That's one question that you could ask. Another question, because a lot of times advice, right, relates back to kind of what we've called consulting or advisory services. When was the last time someone in your organization asked internal audit to do an advisory project? Never? A year ago? Last week? Again, only you can answer that question. But if nobody is from the organization is asking you to do advisory work, then perhaps they don't view you as being someone who can give advice. Again, I'm not saying that you don't have advice to give. We're talking about the perception. Okay. And that's a big part of this, is realizing it's other people's perspective and their perception, not what you think. And so part of becoming a trusted advisor is actually changing the perception. And there are different ways that you can do that. And we're going to talk about that in more detail as we go forward. Okay. So I want you to, let's kind of stop. And again, I'm going to be a little nerdy on you by going back and looking at what does it actually mean to be trusted. Okay. And again, you can start to think to yourself, okay, who are some people that I trust? What are some things about them, right, that make me trust them? Well, they're probably honest with you. They probably tell you the truth most of the time, right? Again, sometimes, as humans, we don't always tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so, if somebody has said something to you that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't trust them, but there's usually a component of honesty to this, right? But it's honesty in the right way, because, some people don't have any tact and they just like to blurt things out, and then they just say, well, I'm just being honest, so you should just accept it. Well, again, you may be right, but I don't agree with your delivery. And so, again, if you're being too honest, or the way in which you're being honest, maybe that actually goes against you as well. Something to consider. So people probably, value honesty in someone that they trust. There's probably some confidentiality to it, in that if you tell me something, you are going to trust that I will keep that confidential just between you and me, right? So maybe confidentiality is an important part of being trusted by other people, right? Again, think about the people that you trust. They're probably kind. They're probably do things in a way to support you, to help you, right? And that's maybe one of the reasons why you trust them as well. Okay. But in order to get to trust, there's a lot of steps that have to be gone through. And I'm going to talk about those, and I'm going to share more about how you can start developing it. Because like I said in the description, I think a lot of times we want to be seen as trusted advisors, but we're not willing to do the work. And there is work involved in order to get to that status. Okay. And so you can think of it in general terms of know, like, and trust. Okay. I'm going to say that again. Know, like, and trust. Okay. And you're going to see that in the future as we go through this, about how important each of those steps actually are. Okay. So let's see how the dictionary defines truth to see if we can learn anything from that, right? And so again, it's one of those words in the English language that is both a noun and a verb. So it's an action word, but it's also a person, place, or thing, right? And so if we look at, from a noun perspective, there's lots of things around trust, right? Like it's a legal entity, right? Uh, you know, different things like that. And that's not really what we're talking about, right? But one of the noun definitions does have something to do with what we're talking about. And it says acceptance of the truth of a statement without evidence or investigation, the state of being responsible for someone or something. Okay. So when you've established trust and you have the noun trust, then people don't feel like they have to fact check you all the time, right? So once you've established that trust, right, they don't have to fact check you all the time. Now, what is fact checking? Well, again, if, I've said certain things, I've learned certain things over time, some of those things are not true. In fact, one family member I have likes to fact check all the time. And it's not just me, it's other people in the family as well. But, there's been several instances where I have said something in a social gathering, and all of a sudden this person pulls out their phone, they do a Google search, and they're like, nope, that's not right. It's like, excuse me, what? And they, go on to explain why whatever I had just said was not true according to Google. Now, I didn't say anything because I was lying about it. It was something maybe that I had learned. So, as an example, I had learned something on a tour that I took in London, something the tour guide told me. And again, I trusted the tour guide, so I just thought that was the case. But it actually was not true when I went back and fact checked it, right? And again, I should have probably known better because that was more for entertainment purposes necessarily, and it really didn't matter, right? But before you can just take someone at their word, you usually have to kind of test it a little bit and see if what they're saying is actually truthful. And once you have established that, that's where that noun trust actually comes in. Okay. So let's look at it from a verb perspective, right? It's things like believing in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone, right? So if I trust you, that's an action. That's the verb, right? If I trust you, then I believe in the reliability or the truth of what you're saying, right? And so again, as we think about this from being trusted advisors, right? The other person, in order for them to trust us, they need to have some reliability or belief in truth or in our ability of what we're saying. Okay. So that goes along with what we're talking about today. Okay. And so again, I wanted to just kind of start to set the stage today of maybe some things that we can do to improve our status and move to that trusted advisor status instead of just being a necessary evil to people in our organizations, which unfortunately a lot of times internal audit is seen that way, right? So I told you to begin with about knowing, liking, and trusting. So where does this come from? Know, like, and trust. Well, know, like, and trust comes from a lot of people in marketing and in sales talk in those terms. Know, like, and trust. Okay. So where that comes from is from a sales perspective, let's say, no one will do business with you. No one will buy from you unless they know you, like you, and trust you. Okay. And it goes in that order: know, like, and trust. Okay. Before anyone will ever trust you, they need to know you, they need to like you, and then you need to show that you're trustworthy, that you're reliable, and then they will trust you. Okay. So again, at the beginning, I said a lot of people in internal audit never make it to that status. They want to believe that they have, but they're not doing the work around knowing, liking, and then moving into trust. Okay. So let's talk about the first one a little bit, because like I said, this is going to be a video series. And so I'm going to go through and talk about different parts of it in each of the different videos. But let's spend a few minutes today just talking a little bit more about the knowing, right? In the know, like, and trust. Okay. So when you think about people that you know and about people that you don't know, what's the difference? Well, you may know that my name is Jason Mefford, right? It's right here on the screen. You've probably watched other videos or seen other things that I've done. So you know my name is Jason Mefford. But do you know me? Right? Knowing one's name doesn't mean that you know them. It means you know their name, right? And so a lot of people will say, well, this executive, they know who I am. Well, do they know who you are? Or do they just know your name? Chances are they just know your name and they don't actually know who you are. So what does it take for people to start to know you? Well, they need to have some interaction with you, right? They need to know a little bit more about you. Maybe they could be psychodemographic, things like that, but they need to know who you are as an individual as well. And so again, you can look at me and you can say, well, I know his name. I know his face. I know he's a crazy guy that wears hats and says some crazy things. Okay, so now you're starting to know a little more about me, right? You know that pretty much every time you see me on video, I'm wearing a hat, and it's often a different hat. So there's something now that you know about me. Jason likes hats. Okay. You also can see that for the most part, I usually am wearing glasses. Why? I must have some corrective sight issues, right? Again, I wear contacts, so I can usually see fine from a distance, but mid and closer things, a lot of times I need to have glasses. So now you know that about me. And again, there are things that we can learn about other people, that we can learn to know about other people just from observing them. Okay? You can observe certain things about me without me ever even having to tell you. If you've been listening to me for a long time, you know that I used to weigh a lot more than I do now, right? If you go back and look at some of my videos from years ago, I'm 80 pounds lighter than I was, a few years ago. You'll know that I grew a beard as well, right? I have a beard now. I never did for the longest time. Now, why? Right? That's something about me, but you don't really know about me. You know something about me, but you don't really know me just from observing. The only way to really start knowing someone is to interact with them, to communicate with them. Again, you can look at, I purposely have things in the background. Some things are there on purpose. Some things it just happens to be the physical makeup of my office that some things are going to be showing. Okay. But you can start to get clues about me. And then, if we actually have a conversation, you can get to know me better. Okay. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to show you some things. Okay. And I'm going to use my little pin here as a pointer. You'll notice that in the background, there are certain things on the wall. And so I'm going to point to that one, that picture right there. Okay. So if you see this picture, again, depending on if you're on your phone, you might not be able to see it. If you're on a computer, you can. But that is a picture of me scuba diving. So you might ask yourself, Jason has a picture on his wall of scuba diving. Now, if you really want to get to know me, you might ask me a question about that. You might say something like, Jason, I noticed that you have a picture of scuba diving in the back. Are you a scuba diver? Right? You can ask me a question. We could start our communication. And as we start communicating, you're going to get to know me better. And so I will just share with you. I'm going to pretend again that you asked me that question. And I'm going to say, no, I have scuba dived once in my life, and that's it. And I will probably never scuba dive again in my life. To which point you might say, well, that's interesting. Could you share more about why that is? Okay. The more that we communicate, the more you're going to get to know me, right? To which I would say, well, I've never been a very good swimmer. In fact, I have almost drowned a couple of times. So I don't really like to swim. I don't really go in the ocean. I didn't grow up near water. I did live in California for a long time next to the water, but I've just never been a very strong swimmer. I was good enough that I didn't drown those couple of times, but I kind of have a fear of drowning, right? Now, all of a sudden, you're starting to know a little bit more about me. To which you might say, well, that's interesting. Then why do you have a picture of scuba diving on your wall? To which I would say, well, I never really wanted to go scuba diving. It wasn't anything that was a bucket list, that I had to do before I died. I thought it might be kind of cool because I know a lot of people like to do it. But here's the reason why I did it. When I was teaching in the Middle East, I used to travel a lot and I would go to the Middle East a lot. And I became friends with a man who lives in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, which happens to be on or near the Red Sea. And some of the best scuba diving in the world is right there at the Red Sea. And this man that I became friends with, he's actually a master scuba diver. He's been certified. He goes out all the time. He teaches people on how to do it, takes them out. And he just kept talking to me about how amazing scuba diving was. Right. But the whole time I'm still in a little bit of fear and I'm thinking, no, I don't really want to do that. Thank you very much. But not a very good swimmer. No, thank you. But he kept talking to me about it. And eventually it got to a point where I was actually in Jeddah over the weekend. And he said, come on, you're here for the weekend. Let me take you out and let's go scuba diving and I will show you how amazing it is. And so I put on my little risk management hat and I'm like, fear of drowning, all this kind of stuff. But then I also was saying, well, but I know people do it all the time and I know he does it. And if I'm going to go scuba diving with anyone in the world, I'm probably safest with him, right? I'm probably safest going out scuba diving with him because he's a world-class scuba diver. And so I said, okay, let's go. And so we went out scuba diving. Now, I put all the gear on, and he kind of led me over to this area where we would kind of go down. And if you've ever scuba dived, you're wearing flippers and they're kind of awkward to walk in and they're slippery. And we go over and go down into this area where you're supposed to kind of walk down these rocks and go into the water. And so I started going down, and the waves kept coming in and hitting me. And I was unsteady, and I was kind of slipping around a little bit. And I was slipping because there was algae on the rocks, and that was slick, and the fins made it hard for me to walk. And I started to freak out. I started to have a panic attack. Okay. And he looked over at me, and he knew what was happening. He knew what was happening. Right. And so he said, don't worry. Here, come here. Let me take you over here. Why don't you sit down here for a while? I'm going to take the other people in. I'll come back and get you in 15 or 20 minutes. And so I said, okay. So I sat down. And again, I was a little bummed because I'm the kind of person who, I don't shrink away from adventure. I don't shrink away from my fears. And so I thought, damn it, I'm going to do this. And so I'm psyching myself up. And he comes back, after you've taken the other people, he's like, oh, how are you feeling now? Are you better? I'm like, yeah, I think I'm better. He's like, why don't we go over on this side instead of this other side? I think it'll be a little easier for you to get in. And so we went in the other side. And he was right. We had all these little, thumb signals. He'd keep looking at me with the thumbs up, like, are you okay? And I'm like, yep, I'm okay. Everything's all right. And so we went in and we went down, and he regulated everything for me, right? And I had a beautiful experience being under the water, seeing the fish and everything that was underneath. There was this great kind of sense of calmness that I felt being under the water, when you're not hearing anything else. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience for me for whatever the 10, 15, 20 minutes was that I was in the water. And when I came out of the water, I was so elated. I was so happy that I had conquered my fear, that the electricity was just running through my body. And I just felt high on life. It was one of the greatest feelings that I had after I pushed through that particular experience that scared the hell out of me. Okay. That's why I have that picture on the wall. It's not because I love scuba diving, right? I told you I'm probably never going to go again in my life, but it represents to me and reminds me that when I push through my fear, there's something great on the other side. Okay. That's why the picture is there. So again, now that you have heard me say that, do you know me a little better? Of course you do, right? But in internal audit, we usually don't take the time to get to know somebody else and to let somebody know us, because we put up this boundary and we think, oh, well, if I'm friendly with you, if I'm friends with you, if I talk to you, then I'm not going to be objective. And so I can't do that. And so instead, what it means is people never get to know us, right? And if we don't know the other people, we can never trust them. Okay. Now, something else interesting about this story. I told you I was scared. Why did I go in? Because I trusted my friend. I trusted my friend. Why did I trust him? I knew him, right? We knew each other for, I don't know, it was probably over a year at least that I had interactions with him. So I knew who he was. I knew a little bit about him, about his family, about his career, about who he was as a person. I knew that he was a kind person who wanted me to have a good experience. I liked him, right? I wouldn't consider him a friend if I didn't like him. And then I trusted him because I knew what his qualifications were. I knew the kind of scuba diver that he was. And I knew if there was anybody that I could trust to have that experience with, it was him. So there you can see know, like, and trust in that story as well. Okay. So, as I said, there is work that we need to do if you want somebody to trust you and if you want somebody to see you as a trusted advisor. And so I'm going to wrap up this video because, again, as I said, I'm going to do several in this series. But here's the first one where we talked a little bit, again, about what trust is, about the fact that people have to know you, like you, before they will ever trust you. And we talked a little bit about knowing and some different ways that you can get to know other people and that other people can get to know you. And again, we're going to dig more into this in the future videos. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for now. So if you have questions, make sure and leave them in the comments. And I'll see you on the next video.